Since ancient times, humanity has sought signs in the heavens. The prophets of the Old Testament looked to the stars and the movements of the celestial bodies for answers. The wise men of the East followed a star to find the Savior. But today, in the 21st century, the question resonates louder than ever. Are we about to witness a heavenly sign so shocking that it will change the destiny of humanity? The Virgin Mary, in various apparitions throughout history, has left messages laden with warnings and promises. Messages that many dismissed, others forgot, and a few treasured in their hearts. The truth is that, in recent years, the number of testimonies, visions, and inexplicable phenomena that seem to point to a single fact has intensified. Something great is about to happen. In Garabandal, Spain, in the early 1960s, 4 girls claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary and received messages about a future worldwide warning. According to the testimony of Conchita Gonzalez, one of the visionaries, a day will come when everyone, without exception, will see their soul as God sees it. A moment of inner illumination so powerful that many will fall to their knees, weeping for their sins. That prediction left thousands of people with their hearts in suspense. Decades later, that warning has yet to arrive, but the tension remains, almost like a shadow that grows larger as the years pass. And Garabandal wasn't the only one to witness these announcements. In Akita, Japan, in 1973, a statue of the Virgin Mary wept 101 times before the astonished gaze of the faithful. Scientists who analyzed the tears confirmed they were human tears. Akita's message was clear: if humanity doesn't repent, a great chastisement will fall upon the earth. Droughts, wars, natural disasters. Everything that seemed distant has come closer, like dominoes falling one after another. In the 1990s, in Civitavecchia, Italy, another statue of the Virgin Mary also wept blood. This time, the news spread rapidly through the media. Doctors, experts, and even church authorities investigated the case. The results of the tests were shocking. The blood type was human and matched the blood type found on the Shroud of Turin. Whether it was a coincidence or a direct sign from heaven, the debate continues. But the question remains: what is the Mother of God trying to tell us? Current events only increase the concern. Devastating fires on entire continents, floods in places where it never rained before, earthquakes in areas considered safe. The earth seems to be screaming, issuing a call for help. And while governments blame each other, while science tries to find rational explanations, there are those who look to the heavens, seeking a deeper, more spiritual answer. Contemporary visionaries have also begun to receive warning messages. In Medjugorje, Bosnia-Herzegovina, where Marian apparitions have continued since 1981, the messages increasingly focus on urgent conversion and the approaching time of great change. The 6 leading visionaries of Medjugorje have claimed to know a secret that will be revealed to the world at the time appointed by heaven. 3 days before each of the prophesied events occurs, a priest will publicly announce what is about to happen, giving humanity time to prepare. But what kind of sign will it be? Some believe it will be a visible sign in the sky, an astronomical phenomenon impossible to ignore. Others speak of an inner phenomenon, a spiritual warning that each person will experience intimately and personally, as if the veil covering spiritual reality were suddenly torn away. What is certain is that it will not be a simple natural phenomenon. It will not be something that can be easily explained by science or the media. It will be an event of such magnitude that even the most skeptical will be forced to acknowledge that something out of the ordinary is happening. And it is here that the prophecies begin to intertwine. Fatima, Garabandal, Akita, Medjugorje, all point to a time of great trial and great mercy. Our Lady has not ceased to warn us. Humanity has forgotten God, has fallen into pride, selfishness, and senseless violence. And like every loving mother, she does not want her children to suffer the consequences of their mistakes. The testimonies of those who have witnessed small signs beforehand are shocking. People have seen the sun dance in the sky, as happened at Fatima in 1917, before more than 70,000 witnesses. Others claim to have seen luminous crosses, clouds taking the form of sacred figures, or even to have heard inner voices calling them to conversion. What is most striking is that these testimonies come from ordinary people, housewives, farmers, young students, even avowed atheists who, after living through these experiences, radically changed their lives. And while all this is happening, social media, television, and digital platforms continue to fill with content that distracts, that lulls, that diverts attention from what's truly important. But there are those who are awakening, who feel that the time of indifference is over. People like you who are here, listening to this message, searching for answers. The question that remains is unavoidable. Will we be able to recognize the sign when it comes, or will we overlook it, as has happened so often in human history? Many will remember Jesus' words, "When you see these things, lift up your heads, because your redemption is near." And it is precisely this uncertainty, this expectant silence that leads us to the next point, because understanding where these signs will appear could make the difference between being prepared or being taken by surprise. Since ancient times, humanity has looked to the sky for signs. The prophets of the Old Testament looked to the stars and the movements of the celestial bodies in search of answers. The wise men of the East followed a star to find the Savior. But today, in the 21st century, the question resonates louder than ever. Are we about to witness a heavenly sign so shocking that it will change the destiny of humanity? The Virgin Mary, in various apparitions throughout history, has left messages laden with warnings and promises. Messages that many dismissed, others forgot, and a few treasured in their hearts. The truth is that in recent years, the number of testimonies, visions, and inexplicable phenomena that seem to point to a single fact has intensified. Something great is about to happen. In Garabandal, Spain, in the early 1960s, 4 girls claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary and received messages about a future worldwide warning. According to the testimony of Conchita Gonzalez, one of the visionaries, a day will come when everyone, without exception, will see their soul as God sees it. A moment of inner illumination so powerful that many will fall to their knees, weeping for their sins. That prediction left thousands of people with their hearts in suspense. Decades later, that warning has yet to arrive, but the tension remains, almost like a shadow that grows larger as the years pass. And Garabandal wasn't the only one to witness these announcements. In Akita, Japan, in 1973, a statue of the Virgin Mary wept 101 times before the astonished gaze of the faithful. Scientists who analyzed the tears confirmed they were human tears. Akita's message was clear: if humanity doesn't repent, a great chastisement will fall upon the earth. Droughts, wars, natural disasters, everything that seemed distant has come closer like dominoes falling one after another. In the 1990s, in Civitavecchia, Italy, another statue of the Virgin Mary also wept blood. This time, the news spread rapidly through the media. Doctors, experts, and even church authorities investigated the case. The results of the tests were shocking. The blood type was human and matched the blood type found on the Shroud of Turin. Whether it was a coincidence or a direct sign from heaven, the debate continues. But the question remains: what is the Mother of God trying to tell us? Current events only increase the concern. Devastating fires on entire continents, floods in places where it never rained before, earthquakes in areas considered safe. The earth seems to be screaming, issuing a call for help. And while governments blame each other, while science tries to find rational explanations, there are those who look to the heavens, seeking a deeper, more spiritual answer. Contemporary visionaries have also begun to receive warning messages. In Medjugorje, Bosnia-Herzegovina, where Marian apparitions have continued since 1981, the messages increasingly focus on urgent conversion and the approaching time of great change. The 6 leading visionaries of Medjugorje have claimed to know a secret that will be revealed to the world at the time appointed by heaven. 3 days before each of the prophesied events occurs, a priest will publicly announce what is about to happen, giving humanity time to prepare. But what kind of sign will it be? Some believe it will be a visible sign in the sky, an astronomical phenomenon impossible to ignore. Others speak of an inner phenomenon, a spiritual warning that each person will experience intimately and personally, as if the veil covering spiritual reality were suddenly torn away. What is certain is that it will not be a simple natural phenomenon. It will not be something that can be easily explained by science or the media. It will be an event of such magnitude that even the most skeptical will be forced to acknowledge that something out of the ordinary is happening. And it is here that the prophecies begin to intertwine. Fatima, Garabandal, Akita, Medjugorje, all point to a time of great trial and great mercy. Our Lady has not ceased to warn us. Humanity has forgotten God, has fallen into pride, selfishness, and senseless violence. And like every loving mother, she does not want her children to suffer the consequences of their mistakes. The testimonies of those who have witnessed small signs beforehand are shocking. People have seen the sun dance in the sky, as happened at Fatima in 1917 before more than 70,000 witnesses. Others claim to have seen luminous crosses, clouds taking the form of sacred figures, or even to have heard inner voices calling them to conversion. What is most striking is that these testimonies come from ordinary people. Housewives, farmers, young students, even avowed atheists who, after living through these experiences, radically changed their lives. And while all this is happening, social media, television, and digital platforms continue to fill with content that distracts, that lulls, that diverts attention from what's truly important. But there are those who are awakening, who feel that the time of indifference is over. People like you, who are here listening to this message, searching for answers. The question that remains is unavoidable. Will we be able to recognize the sign when it comes, or will we overlook it, as has happened so often in human history? Many will remember Jesus' words, "When you see these things, lift up your heads, because your redemption is near." And it is precisely this uncertainty, this expectant silence, that leads us to the next point, because understanding where these signs will appear could make the difference between being prepared or being taken by surprise. As we delve deeper into the mystery of heavenly signs, an inevitable question arises that has troubled believers and scholars for decades. Why do some cities, towns, or regions seem to be chosen time and again as the setting for Marian manifestations? What is so special about these places that makes them recipients of warnings, miracles, and messages from heaven? If we look at the map of the most famous Marian apparitions, we'll notice a pattern that seems to go beyond mere coincidence. Fatima, Portugal; Lourdes, France; Garabandal, Spain; Medjugorje, Bosnia-Herzegovina; Akita, Japan; and more recently, places like San Nicolas, Argentina, and Kibeho, Rwanda. Different continents, different cultures, but one common message: the urgent need for conversion and prayer. Fatima, for example, was a small and humble Portuguese village. In 1917, 3 shepherd children became spokespersons for the Virgin Mary before thousands of people. The sun rotating in the sky, predictions of future wars, and the call to pray the rosary marked the modern history of faith. But why Fatima and not Lisbon? Why in an isolated village and not in a large city? Some scholars point out that these places, far from the hustle and bustle of the modern world, represent the purity and simplicity of the human heart, fertile ground where God's message can be sown without interference. Garabandal in the 1960s is also a curious case. A remote village in the mountainous region of Cantabria, Spain, 4 humble girls received messages that, to this day, remain the subject of theological debate. The choice of Garabandal seems to respond to a pattern: small, discreet places, far from the corruption of the world. However, what is most striking is that the Virgin Mary's messages in Garabandal included the promise of a visible sign that will remain in the air at the site of the apparitions. A sign that no one will be able to touch, but everyone will be able to see and record. And most disturbing, that sign will be permanent. Medjugorje, another striking example, is a town of just a few thousand inhabitants. In 1981, 6 young people began experiencing daily apparitions of the Virgin Mary. More than 40 years later, some of them continue to receive messages. There, amid the mountains of Bosnia-Herzegovina, millions of pilgrims have witnessed profound conversions, physical and spiritual healings, and inexplicable phenomena such as the famous miracle of the sun. Why Medjugorje, and not a major European capital? The answer seems to be repeated over and over again. Heaven chooses the small to confound the powerful. Akita, Japan, offers another perspective. In this case, the Virgin Mary chose a small community of nuns to deliver a warning message to the entire world. Japan, a country where Christianity is a minority, was the chosen location to convey a universal message. Humanity is heading toward a great purification if it does not change course. The tears of the wooden statue, analyzed by experts, were human tears. A miracle that defied science and to this day perplexes believers and non-believers alike. In Latin America, we also find surprising cases. In San Nicolas, Argentina, during the 1980s, a simple woman named Gladys Quiroga de Mota began receiving messages from Our Lady of the Rosary. The content of these messages was direct: calls to conversion, warnings about the dangers of apostasy, and the urgent need to return to God. And in Rwanda, Africa, in the town of Kibeho, Our Lady appeared to several young people, warning of a future of pain and violence. Shortly after, the country witnessed one of the most brutal genocides in recent history. These patterns of geographic choice have led many to wonder if there are invisible factors that make certain places strategically important for heaven. Some speak of ley lines, supposed routes of spiritual energy that crisscross the earth and connect sacred sites. Others point to regions where faith, though silent, remains deep and authentic. There are also theories that point to a larger symbolism, that heaven chooses humble places to remind us that God's power is not manifested where there is arrogance, but where there is simplicity and openness of heart. But even with these explanations, the mystery remains. Why Garabandal and not Madrid? Why Medjugorje and not Rome? Why San Nicolas and not Buenos Aires? Is there a divine logic beyond our human understanding? Or are we simply witnessing a heavenly plan unfolding little by little before our eyes? The testimonies of pilgrims who have visited these places are moving. People who came seeking a physical miracle and found inner healing. Broken families who were reconciled after praying together on a hilltop where the Virgin Mary appeared. Young people who, amid the confusion of modern life, found in these places a renewed sense of purpose and hope. And while these places continue to receive thousands of visitors each year, new ones are beginning to attract the attention of the Catholic world. These are areas where, according to some contemporary visionaries, new signs could manifest very soon. Some claim that Latin America will witness a great Marian manifestation in the coming years. Others believe that countries that have never before experienced apparitions could be surprised by an urgent message from heaven. The reality is that humanity's spiritual map is constantly shifting. And the fact that these places have been chosen time and again invites us to reflect. If in the past, God chose humble and discreet peoples to manifest his presence, who can guarantee that tomorrow our own city, our own neighborhood, or even our own home won't be the scene of the next great sign? because after understanding why certain places have been chosen, the next logical step is to listen to what those who live through these experiences have to say. True testimonies from people who witnessed the inexplicable, who experienced firsthand the weight of a heavenly message, and who today warn us with trembling but determined voices about what comes next. When we talk about Marian manifestations and the signs that could change the course of humanity, it is impossible to overlook those who have been silent protagonists of these events, the witnesses. Ordinary people who, from one moment to the next, found themselves involved in inexplicable situations, in experiences that defied all human logic. Men, women, young people, and even children who, without seeking it, were chosen to contemplate what many have only read about in books or heard in other people's stories. One of the most moving testimonies is that of Lucia dos Santos, the principal visionary of Fatima. From the age of 10, she witnessed apparitions of the Virgin Mary with her cousins Francisco and Jacinta. Lucia's life changed forever. Years later, as a Carmelite nun, she wrote her memoirs, recounting in detail every word, every vision, every supernatural experience she experienced. Lucia had to face the skepticism of civil and ecclesiastical authorities, endure interrogations, doubts, and, of course, the disbelief of many. However, her steadfastness never wavered. She knew what she had seen. She knew she had been chosen to carry an urgent message to the world. In Garabandal, the children Conchita, Jacinta, Mari Loli, and Mari Cruz had a similar experience. Their accounts coincided in such specific details that it was difficult to believe it was all a figment of their imagination. One of the most striking scenes was when the girls, in a state of ecstasy, walked backward at great speed along steep, obstacle-strewn paths without suffering a single scratch. The doctors who examined them were perplexed. How was it possible for such young girls, in the midst of a trance, to have superhuman reflexes and inexplicable physical stamina? Those images, captured on video and photographs, still circulate today among those who research Marian phenomena. The case of Akita, Japan, brought with it another type of witness: scientists. When the statue of the Virgin Mary began to weep, there was no shortage of skeptics who sought a logical explanation. Samples were taken to independent laboratories, and the result was always the same: human tears. But not just tears. There was also blood and sweat, equally human. Faced with this evidence, some experts simply chose to remain silent. Others, braver, publicly admitted that they could offer no scientific explanation. Sister Agnes Sasagawa, the main witness from Akita, was the one who received the messages directly. A woman deaf since childhood, she began to clearly hear the voice of the Virgin Mary during the apparitions. And the most astonishing thing, after the apparitions, her hearing was completely restored. In Medjugorje, the 6 visionaries were examined by doctors, psychologists, and neurologists from around the world. The tests included brainwave studies during the apparitions, cardiac monitoring, and neurological examinations. The results baffled the scientific community. During moments of ecstasy, the visionaries lost all sensitivity to pain, did not blink or react to external stimuli, yet at the same time, they remained fully conscious and oriented. Some specialists have classified this as an altered state of consciousness that cannot be artificially induced. Once again, science is confronted with the inexplicable. But not all witnesses are direct visionaries. At each apparition site, thousands of pilgrims have claimed to have witnessed secondary phenomena: the sun rotating, luminous figures in the sky, the scent of roses in places where there are no flowers, sudden cures from terminal illnesses, and sudden conversions of people far from the faith. In Lourdes, for example, more than 70 cures have been officially recognized by the Church as miraculous, after rigorous medical investigations ruled out any natural explanation. One of the most recent testimonies comes from San Nicolas, Argentina. There, thousands of people claim to have seen the sun move across the sky like a living flame, changing colors and forming cross-like shapes. Gladys Quiroga de Motta, the main visionary, a simple housewife, was called to transmit messages from the Virgin Mary, despite her shyness and lack of theological training. The messages she received, full of calls to prayer and penance, were collected and analyzed by church authorities, who, after years of study, gave their official approval to the phenomenon. There are also cases in which eyewitnesses recounted hearing inner voices that led them to go to these places without knowing exactly why. People who, in the middle of the night, heard a sweet voice calling their name, prompting them to undertake journeys of thousands of miles just to arrive in time for an unexpected event or apparition. And in each story, a common denominator, a feeling of inner peace mixed with an urgency for change, for conversion, for reconciliation with God. These testimonies cannot be ignored. They are stories from people who, in many cases, had no reason to lie, who even faced ridicule, social rejection, and personal hardships for daring to share what they experienced. And yet, they remained steadfast, certain that the message they received was far greater than their own fears. And while these voices continue to resonate in different parts of the world, there is a profound echo that seems to reach every heart that stops to listen. The time of indifference is over. Because if so many have seen, heard and felt, the real question that now concerns us is, what do these messages that heaven has been tirelessly sending for decades really contain? What does the Virgin Mary want us to understand before it is too late? And it is precisely that response, the direct and profound content of the heavenly messages, that awaits us in the next phase of this revelation that is just beginning to unfold before our eyes. When heaven speaks, it does so with urgency, with love, but also with a shocking seriousness. In each Marian apparition, the messages delivered by the Virgin have not been simple words of comfort. No, they have been true warnings, profound calls to spiritual awakening for a humanity that little by little has been losing its way. And although each message has its own particularity, there is a common thread, an invisible thread that unites all these revelations like pieces of a single puzzle. At Fatima in 1917, the message was direct and prophetic. Our Lady spoke of wars, of persecutions against the Church, of the suffering of the innocent. She showed the children a vision of hell that marked them forever. It was not an act of fear, but of mercy. She wanted humanity to understand the fate that awaits it if it does not change its path. The call to pray the rosary every day, to offer sacrifices for the conversion of sinners, to consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart, all were part of a divine strategy to prevent greater evils. Decades later, in Akita, Japan in 1973, Our Lady was even clearer. She said, "If men do not repent and improve, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all of humanity. It will be a punishment greater than the flood, such as has never been seen before." And she continued, "Fire will fall from the sky and wipe out a large part of humanity." Harsh words, terrifying. But they were not empty threats. They were maternal warnings, like a mother who sees her child walking toward an abyss and screams, begs, cries to prevent him from taking the next step. At Garabandal, the messages revolved around a future punishment that would come if the world did not repent. But they also spoke of a great sign that would remain in the sky, visible to all, as a last opportunity for conversion. And even more, a warning, a worldwide event in which every human being will see their soul as God sees it. This is not a mystical vision reserved for a select few. No, it is an experience that, according to the messages, we will all live through. Believers and non-believers, rich and poor, young and old. It will be an inner judgment, a mirror of the soul that cannot be avoided or silenced. Would we be prepared if it happened today? In Medjugorje, Our Lady gave 10 secrets to the visionaries. Some already know them all, others don't yet, but there is a promise. When the time comes, one of the visionaries will reveal to the world, in advance, the events that are about to happen. They will be visible, concrete, irrefutable signs. And although they have not yet been officially revealed, those who have been close to these visionaries speak of awe when the content of these secrets is mentioned. One of the priests linked to the phenomenon has said, "After the third secret, nothing will be the same." In San Nicolas, Argentina, the messages were repetitive. Humanity is moving away from God at a dangerous speed. There was talk of confusion within the church, of pastors leading the flock astray, of a faith that is diluted by modern materialism. But there was also talk of hope. "My Son has granted abundant graces to those who return to him." The Virgin does not come to condemn, she comes to warn, to offer the possibility of radical change before the point of no return. Rwanda, Kibeho. There, the Virgin Mary wept. She showed the young visionaries bloody scenes of what would happen if hatred wasn't replaced by forgiveness. And a few years later, one of the most atrocious genocides of the 20th century was unleashed. Was it a coincidence? Or did humanity simply not listen in time? Those who lived through the horror of that massacre remember how the messages were dismissed by many. The consequences, tragically, were not long in coming. And the messages are not just warnings, they also contain promises. At Fatima, Our Lady assured us, "In the end, my immaculate heart will triumph." At Medjugorje, she said, "Through you, I desire to renew the world." At Akita, despite the announcement of punishment, she also offered consolation. "Those who take refuge in me will be protected." Each message has two sides, that of imminent danger and that of possible salvation. And this duality is what makes them so powerful. These are not messages to generate panic, but to provoke change. Now, why so much insistence? Why so many apparitions, so many revelations, so many urgent calls? The answer, perhaps, lies in an uncomfortable truth. Humanity has become deaf. It no longer hears the warnings of conscience. It no longer perceives the whispers of the soul. It has filled its world with noise, technology, entertainment, and superficiality. And in the midst of this chaos, heaven attempts to open a chasm of silence to speak to the heart. The most striking thing is that many of the messages delivered decades ago seem to speak to the present with astonishing precision. Economic crises, pandemics, wars, internal divisions within the church, loss of faith, destruction of the family, idolatry of pleasure, genetic manipulation, natural disasters. All of this was anticipated in various Marian messages. How could they have foreseen it? What human mind could have anticipated it in such detail? It's not divination. It's a spiritual vision that transcends time. And yet, despite everything, the messages continue to be ignored by millions. Why? Out of fear, out of disbelief, out of comfort. Perhaps all of these combined. But the truth is that heaven has not surrendered, and it will not. Because in every generation, new voices arise that, like John the Baptist in the desert, continue to cry out, "Repent, the kingdom of God is at hand." Perhaps the real question isn't whether these messages are real. The real question is, are we willing to listen? Because the next stage of this story will not leave us indifferent. If until now we have explored the messages, what follows takes us directly to the heart of divine action in human history, where the signs begin to be fulfilled one by one before our very eyes. There are moments in history when the heavens seem to open, when creation itself becomes the spokesperson for invisible messages crying out to be heard. Celestial signs are not a new phenomenon, but in recent decades, their frequency and spectacular nature have captured the attention of millions around the world. From suns that rotate and change color, to cloud formations with faces or sacred figures, to the northern lights in places where they have never been seen before, the sky has become a divine canvas that many can no longer ignore. One of the most striking examples occurred in Fatima on October 13th, 1917. That day, around 70,000 people, both believers and skeptics, gathered at the Kova da Iria under heavy rain. The media of the time were present, including journalists of different ideologies and special correspondents from renowned newspapers. Suddenly, after the visionary children's prayers, the sun began to spin in the sky like a gigantic wheel of fire, casting colored lights and moving in a zigzag pattern as if about to fall upon the crowd. The ground, which was completely soaked by the rain, dried in a matter of seconds. Those who witnessed the phenomenon were forever marked. To this day, Portuguese newspaper archives hold accounts that recount that event with astonishment and without a convincing scientific explanation. Decades later in Medjugorje, Bosnia-Herzegovina, thousands of pilgrims have reported seeing similar phenomena. In the middle of the afternoon, the sun appears to vibrate, spin, and emit lights that form crosses or Marian figures. People with vision problems have been able to look directly at the sun without suffering any eye damage, while tears of emotion stream down their faces. Mass hallucination, atmospheric phenomenon. Science has attempted to explain these events, but the experience shared by so many is difficult to reduce to a simple meteorological coincidence. In San Nicolas, Argentina, during some of the mass prayer gatherings, witnesses reported the appearance of a pulsating sun, which changed color and seemed to beat like a heart. Some recorded home videos that still circulate on the internet. Even those who went only out of curiosity returned home deeply moved by what they saw. But these signs have not only occurred in well-known apparition sites. In several cities around the world, at key moments, the sky has been the scene of unexpected manifestations. On December 25, 2012, for example, residents of Moscow reported a phenomenon of multiple solar halos, forming concentric circles around the sun. For many, it was merely an optical illusion. For others, it was yet another sign that something transcendental was brewing. In Rwanda, shortly before the 1994 genocide, witnesses in Kibeho reported seeing luminous crosses in the sky and abrupt changes in the color of the sun. These signs were interpreted by some as warnings of the suffering to come. And indeed, months later, the entire country was plunged into one of the bloodiest tragedies in its history. Another phenomenon that has caught the attention of thousands is the appearance of figures in the clouds. Photographs from around the world show the outlines of what appear to be the faces of Christ, the Virgin Mary, or angels. While for some this may simply be pareidolia, the human brain's tendency to recognize familiar shapes, for many believers, they are signs, caresses from heaven seeking to rekindle dormant faith. And what about the nighttime luminous phenomena? On several occasions, in areas near Marian shrines, lights have been seen that seem to dance in the sky, or stars that inexplicably change position. In Medjugorje, numerous pilgrims claim to have witnessed what they call the dance of the stars, a phenomenon in which the points of light in the sky appear to move rhythmically as if responding to a divine choreography. But perhaps one of the most moving cases occurred in Lipa, Philippines in 1948. During the apparitions of Our Lady, known there as Our Lady Mediatrix of All Graces, a shower of rose petals fell from the sky, covering the gardens of the Carmelite convent where the visionary Teresita Castillo lived. The most surprising thing was that these petals, when examined by witnesses, showed tiny engravings of Marian and Christological images. Many of these petals are still preserved today as relics. Some might wonder why the heavens choose these methods to communicate. Why resort to visual phenomena? The answer seems to lie in human nature. We need to see to believe. And in an increasingly skeptical and materialistic world where faith has been displaced by logic and science, these signs become wake-up calls that are impossible to ignore. They are not just warnings for fervent believers. They are also messages for unbelievers, for the indifferent, for those who have closed their hearts to the transcendent. They are reminders that the visible world is not all that exists, that there are spiritual dimensions constantly at work around us. And while scientists search for explanations, while some try to ridicule these events and others simply dismiss them as optical illusions, there are millions of people who, upon witnessing these signs, have felt an inner awakening. Many, after witnessing these phenomena, have decided to change their lives, return to prayer, approach the sacraments, and reconcile with God. Heaven continues to speak, and it does so in the way it knows will impact us the most, through what we can see with our own eyes. But these signs are not the end of the story. They are merely a prelude. Because if heaven has given such powerful visual warnings, what can we expect from the events to come? The messages announce concrete facts, events that will affect all of humanity. And that is precisely what we will address next. The history of humanity is full of ignored warnings, of missed opportunities to avoid disaster. And when one analyzes the most important Marian messages of recent times, it is impossible not to notice a pattern. Our Lady has been painfully anticipating what has ultimately happened. Every catastrophe, every tragedy, every collective suffering that has struck the world seems to be the echo of those prophecies that for years many ignored. One of the most shocking examples was the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. Years earlier in Kibeho, the Virgin Mary appeared to a group of young students and showed them with harshness visions of violence, death, and rivers of blood. The children cried in terror as they described what they saw: mutilated bodies, people fleeing, entire families destroyed. Some witnesses presented these apparitions tried to alert the authorities, but were treated with indifference. The result? More than 800,000 people were killed in a matter of weeks. The very land where the Virgin Mary warned was stained with the blood of her children. At Fatima, Our Lady spoke of a great war worse than the previous one if humanity did not stop offending God. Years later, World War II broke out, one of the most devastating conflicts in history. The predictions were neither vague nor metaphorical. They were concrete and precise. Even the famous vision of the bishop dressed in white, finally revealed in 2000, showed a pope crossing a ruined city, climbing a hill surrounded by corpses, and finally falling under a hail of bullets. Shortly thereafter, the assassination attempt on St. John Paul II's life in 1981 seemed to give meaning to that vision. The Pope himself claimed that it was thanks to Our Lady's intercession that he survived. In Akita, Japan, the Virgin Mary warned of a punishment worse than the flood. Curiously, years later, Japan was struck by one of the most destructive earthquakes in its modern history, followed by a tsunami that devastated entire cities and triggered the Fukushima nuclear accident. Images of that disaster traveled around the world. Gigantic waves swallowing entire towns, cars and buildings floating like toys carried by the current. Was it a coincidence, or a distant echo of those motherly words spoken years earlier in that small convent of the Sisters of Charity? Prophecy and catastrophe also intersected in Latin America. In San Nicolas, Argentina, the Virgin Mary warned of times of confusion, natural disasters, and growing spiritual indifference. In the following years, the country experienced devastating economic crises, with levels of poverty and suffering affecting millions of people. At the same time, extreme natural phenomena began to become increasingly frequent, and we cannot forget heaven's call regarding nature. In many messages, Our Lady has spoken of earthquakes, unusual storms, fires and droughts that would ravage entire regions as a warning sign. And if we look at recent decades, the increase in the frequency and severity of these events is undeniable. Uncontrollable forest fires in Australia and California, flash floods in Europe and Asia, more powerful cyclones, record temperatures that break all historical records. The planet seems to groan as if creation itself were reacting to human sin. An event that many still remember occurred on December 26, 2004, when an underwater earthquake in the Indian Ocean triggered a tsunami that killed more than 230,000 people in 14 countries. What few people know is that months earlier in various parts of the world, people had reported dreams, visions, and feelings of impending tragedy. Was it a coincidence, or small glimpses of a spiritual sensitivity that still lingers in some hearts? Even today, with the pandemic ravaging the entire world, some recalled Marian messages that spoke of a great illness that would affect humanity, as mentioned in some private revelations, not officially recognized but widely disseminated in prayer circles. The empty streets, the overwhelmed hospitals, the collective anguish, the widespread fear, everything seemed like a page torn from those forgotten prophecies. And heaven's warnings are never meant to generate senseless terror. They are always accompanied by an invitation to conversion, to hope, to a change of life. The Virgin doesn't want to punish, she wants to prevent. She doesn't want her children to suffer, but rather to wake up before it's too late. But modern man, accustomed to seeking rational explanations for everything, continues to close his eyes and ears. He prefers to think that everything is a natural phenomenon, a mere coincidence, or the exaggerations of religious fanatics. Meanwhile, the signs keep increasing, like gentle knocks on the door of a heart that no longer knows how to listen. Now, if these past events were already shocking enough, what can we expect from those to come? Because the messages don't just speak of the past or the present, they also draw a prophetic map toward the immediate future. A future that, according to the revelations, could radically transform life on Earth as we know it today. Imagine for a moment if everything in the world stopped, if the bustle of cities died down, clocks stopped ticking, traffic suddenly ceased, and the air itself seemed to suspend itself in a supernatural silence. Suddenly, millions of people across the planet feel an internal stirring, a kind of invisible but impossible to ignore calling, a tremor that runs through body and soul. Then it happens, the Great Warning. This event, known to many as the illumination of conscience, has been anticipated in various Marian apparitions and prophetic messages. According to the visionaries and mystics who have received revelations about this moment, it will be a universal experience, unique in the history of humanity. Every human being, without exception, will see the true state of their soul in the light of God's truth. There will be no hiding anything. There will be no masks, no justifications, no excuses. Only the naked truth will remain in its purest and most painful form. One of the most well-known visionaries who spoke of the Great Warning was Conchita Gonzalez, one of the girls who witnessed the apparitions in Garabandal, Spain, during the 1960s. According to her, a day will come when everyone, regardless of religion, age, or belief, will simultaneously experience this inner revelation. It will be like experiencing one's own personal judgment before death, but without dying. A moment of total clarity, where the weight of every action, every word, every omission will be understood. To understand the magnitude of what this means, just imagine what it would be like to relive every moment we hurt someone, every time we acted selfishly, every missed opportunity to do good, every blasphemy, every betrayal, every act of indifference. But we won't see it as we remember it now, superficially or justifiably. We will feel it with the same pain we caused others, with the same sadness we provoked in the heart of God. There are those who have experienced what might be called a small personal warning during near-death experiences. People who were clinically dead for a few minutes have recounted how, in a matter of seconds, they saw their entire lives flash before their eyes with astonishing clarity and speed. They felt joy for acts of love, but also profound pain and regret for every mistake. Imagine now that this experience, instead of being experienced by a select few, was experienced by all of humanity at the same time. The messages of Our Lady in different parts of the world agree that the Great Warning will be an act of divine mercy. It will not be a punishment, but a last chance. An urgent call for humanity to wake up before the events that will follow are inevitable. Because, according to these revelations, after the warning will come the punishment and the miracle, but that is something we will discuss later. The testimonies of those who have received visions of this event also describe the sky turning red, as if a bloody aurora were covering the planet. Some speak of a kind of cosmic collision that will cause a loud bang. Others mention a light that will penetrate to the depths of the soul, a light that will reveal the truth of every heart. Whatever form this phenomenon takes, the spiritual impact will be devastating. It won't matter if someone is on a plane, in an office, in a prison, in a hospital, or in the middle of the street. Everyone, absolutely everyone, will experience that moment. And according to Marian messages, some will be so deeply affected by the pain of their conscience that they might even die of fright. Therefore, in many parts of the world, prayer groups have begun to prepare, asking for spiritual strength to face that moment. In Garabandal, Our Lady insisted on the importance of confession and conversion before the warning. She recommended that we approach the sacraments, pray the rosary, and live in grace, because the closer we are to God before the warning, the more bearable this encounter with the truth will be. On the other hand, for those who have lived with their backs to God, the inner suffering will be almost unbearable. There is a striking anecdote about a man who, after reading about the Great Warning, decided to do a deep examination of conscience for the first time in years. As he wrote down each of his sins in his notebook, he began to weep uncontrollably. He realized how many people he had harmed with his decisions, how much indifference he had shown toward those in need, and how much pride he had harbored in his heart. That day, he decided to confess his faults after decades away from the church. His testimony has become an inspiration to many others who, upon learning the message of the warning, have also begun a process of conversion. But the most important thing in all of this is to understand that the Great Warning is not a threat. It's an act of love, an extreme act of love from a father who, before allowing a greater punishment, wants his children to return to him. Our Lady has told us time and again, humanity is on the brink of the abyss, but there is still hope if you respond in time. Many wonder when it will happen. The truth is that the exact date remains a mystery. The messages agree that it will be when the world is at its most critical point of confusion, sin, and estrangement from God. And if we look at the current state of humanity, violence, corruption, loss of values, spiritual indifference, it's not difficult to think that this moment could be closer than we imagine. Some specialists in Marian prophecies claim that early signs are already occurring. The increase in wars, political crises, new diseases, the collapse of social morality. Everything seems to fit into the scenario described by the Virgin as the prelude to the Great Warning. But this is not the last heavenly warning. After the warning, even more shocking events will come, testing the faith of millions. What heaven has in store for us goes far beyond, because the next chapter of this prophetic story will take us directly to the revelation of a miracle that will change the course of humanity. After the shocking impact of the Great Warning, humanity will be left in a state of deep reflection and spiritual confusion. Many will weep with regret, others will be paralyzed by fear, and some will try to deny what they have experienced, seeking rational explanations for what was, in reality, an act of divine mercy. But heaven will not leave its children alone at this crossroads. In that context, the great miracle will arrive, a supernatural sign, visible and tangible, that will confirm that everything announced by the Virgin Mary is absolutely true. The place designated for this event is none other than Garabandal, a small and humble town in northern Spain. There, during the apparitions of the 1960s, the Virgin Mary revealed to the young visionaries that God would perform a miracle so great and evident that it would leave no room for doubt, a miracle that will be etched in the history of humanity and that can be seen by all, both those physically present and those observing it through the media. Conchita Gonzalez, one of the leading visionaries of Garabandal, has explained that this miracle will occur on a specific day, which she knows but cannot yet reveal. All she has said is that it will happen on a Thursday, between the 8th and 16th of any given month, and will coincide with the feast day of a martyr of the Eucharist. Furthermore, it will be preceded by an event that will shock the world, something that will turn the attention of millions of people toward Garabandal. But what exactly will this miracle entail? According to the messages received, it will be a visible phenomenon in the skies, around the pine trees where the Virgin Mary appeared. Everyone present will be able to see it, and even the sick will be healed. Furthermore, unbelievers who attend or witness it from a distance will be deeply impacted. It will not be a natural phenomenon, nor will it have a scientific explanation. It will be so evident, so unusual, that no one will be able to say it is a montage or a collective illusion. The most moving thing is that this sign will remain in Garabandal as a permanent testimony, something visible, palpable, that will defy time and human reason, a kind of heavenly signature that will confirm the authenticity of the Marian apparitions. The visionaries also mentioned that after the miracle, many of those who still had doubts will begin their conversion. People far from God, atheists, agnostics, and even members of other religions will experience an inner transformation. It will be heaven's last attempt to touch the most hardened hearts before even more difficult times arrive. A real-life example of the magnitude of this event occurred in Fatima on October 13, 1917, during the famous Miracle of the Sun. More than 70,000 people witnessed the sun rotate, emitting colorful flashes, coming dangerously close to Earth, and then returning to its original position. Many of those present screamed in terror, others wept with emotion, and some fell to their knees begging God for forgiveness. This event, reported by the press of the time and documented even by non-believers, is a small sample of what the great miracle of Garabandal could be, but on an even more impressive and definitive scale. The striking thing about this promise is that heaven has linked this miracle with a sense of urgency. It will not be a spectacle to satisfy human curiosity. It will be a final call, a cry of love from the Virgin Mary to her children, for them to convert before it is too late. Because after the miracle, according to the messages, a time of decision will come, a period when each soul must clearly choose between light and darkness. The messages warn that after the miracle, many will begin to face persecution for their faith. Humanity will enter a more intense stage of purification, where those who choose God will be tested like never before. It is as if heaven were preparing its spiritual army for a decisive battle to come. One detail that has generated great anticipation is that, on the very day of the miracle, the sick present in Garabandal will be healed, regardless of the severity of their illness. Many who arrive in wheelchairs or with terminal illnesses will recover their health instantly. Furthermore, those present and receiving an inner sign will understand their life's purpose and experience spiritual clarity like never before. Some pilgrims who have already visited Garabandal claim to have felt a supernatural peace when they were near the pines where the miracle will occur. People who came only out of curiosity have returned transformed, with a deep desire to change their lives and draw closer to God. The Virgin also made it clear that those unable to physically travel to Garabandal will be able to witness the miracle through media. This has led many to believe that in the time leading up to the miracle, broadcasting technologies will be fully operational, suggesting that a scenario of total collapse will not occur. However, not everything will be joy after the miracle. Humanity will witness a deeper division between those who accept heaven's call and those who, despite everything, choose to reject it. Because even in the face of the most overwhelming evidence, there will always be hearts that prefer to remain in darkness. That is why Our Lady has so often insisted on the importance of preparing now, of living in a state of grace, of strengthening faith, and of keeping the flame of prayer alive. because the time after the miracle will be decisive for the spiritual destiny of millions. But even with all this hope, the underlying message remains clear. The worst is yet to come, because what comes after the miracle will be even harder to bear. Humanity, despite the warnings, could continue down the path of pride and rebellion. And in that scenario, the next chapter will be the punishment. After the great miracle, heaven will have poured out its last drops of mercy upon humanity. The warning will have revealed the inner truth of every soul. The miracle will have confirmed the authenticity of the heavenly messages with a sign impossible to deny. But despite all this, millions of hearts will remain hardened, clinging to sin, to self-sufficiency, to the systematic rejection of God. And then, when there is no other choice, the punishment will come. Marian prophecies leave no room for doubt. The chastisement is not God's revenge. It is not an impulsive or cruel act. It is the inevitable consequence of a humanity that, after having been warned, enlightened, and blessed, continues walking toward the abyss. It is like a mother who, after begging and warning her son not to touch the fire, sees how he ignores all warnings. The fire burns, not because the mother desires it, but because the child rejects the advice. According to the messages of Garabandal, if humanity does not change after the warning and the miracle, then God will allow a global punishment. The visionaries described this event with words that still send chills down their spines today. They spoke of fire falling from the sky, of profound darkness, of an earthquake that would shake the entire world, and of pain that would be both physical and spiritual, a suffering unmatched by any war or catastrophe experienced to date. In the apparitions of Akita, Japan, Our Lady was also clear. If men do not repent, God will inflict a terrible punishment on all of humanity. It will be a punishment greater than the flood, such as has never been seen before. Sister Agnes Sasagawa, the seer of Akita, heard from heavenly lips that fire would fall from heaven and annihilate a large part of humanity. Neither the Pope, nor the bishops, nor the faithful will be able to avoid this judgment if humanity persists in its rebellion. But the most shocking thing is that these warnings are not limited to one place or time. In Kibeho, Rwanda, in La Salette, France, in Fatima, Portugal, and in Medjugorje, Bosnia, Our Lady has repeated the same cry: conversion, penance, prayer, because if not, punishment will come. And in all cases, she has spoken of a period of great tribulation, of global chaos, of persecution of Christians, and of an unprecedented spiritual judgment. There are living witnesses who have had private visions of the chastisement. An Italian woman named Gisella Cardia, who claims to receive messages from the Virgin, described a future where entire cities will be destroyed in seconds, where technology will collapse, and where darkness will envelop the planet for days. In her testimony, those without faith will fall into despair, but those protected by prayer and the rosary will be like small lights lit in the darkness. There has also been talk of the 3 days of darkness, a revelation present in the writings of saints and blesseds, such as Blessed Anna Maria Taigi and Padre Pio. During those 3 days, the sun will not shine, the stars will not illuminate, and the darkness will be so thick that one will not be able to see even a foot away. Screams, blasphemies, disembodied footsteps will be heard, and evil presences will attempt to deceive those inside their homes. Only blessed candles will provide light, and only consecrated homes will resist. Those who go out or open their windows will be gripped by terror. These prophecies, though chilling, have a purpose: to awaken. They don't seek to sow senseless fear, but to shake the slumbering soul. They make us see that we are living in a decisive time where every decision counts. This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is a spiritual warning that is already resonating in the depths of attentive hearts. But even in the midst of chastisement, God promises protection to his faithful. Our Lady has said in multiple messages that those who live in a state of grace pray the Rosary daily, consecrate their homes to her Immaculate Heart, and remain steadfast in faith will be protected. They will not necessarily be exempt from pain, but they will have the strength and peace to endure it. In the words of the book of Revelation, he who perseveres to the end will be saved. There are historical examples that serve as a reflection of what is to come. In the city of Hiroshima, after the dropping of the atomic bomb, there was a community of Jesuit priests who survived the impact without suffering any harm. They were only half a mile from the epicenter, but their bodies and homes remained intact. The reason? They lived in constant prayer, celebrated the Eucharist daily, and were consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Scientists couldn't explain it, but they could. It was divine protection. In many countries today, prayer cenacles are emerging, hidden communities, families praying the Rosary fervently, and groups living in fasting, penance, and reparation. They are like small spiritual refugees, preparing not only for the chastisement, but for something even deeper, the second coming of Christ. Because all these signs, these announcements, this purification, are not the end, but the prelude to something much greater. The Virgin Mary has said that after the chastisement, a new era will come. But this promise cannot be understood without knowing, understanding, or recognizing what will come next. After the tears shed during the Great Warning, after the miracles that left the world speechless, and after the painful purification of the chastisement, the spiritual dawn will begin to break the long night of darkness. This is the moment that the Virgin Mary has tirelessly promised in each of her apparitions, the triumph of her Immaculate Heart. It will be a time when humanity, finally humbled and redeemed, will understand the true meaning of existence. The survivors will be those who, having passed through the fire of tribulation, have persevered in faith, hope, and love. A small, faithful remnant, purified, strengthened, and ready to live according to God's will. Imagine a world where weapons will no longer exist, where nations will no longer conspire against one another, where families will pray together, where the spiritual hunger that consumes so many souls will finally be satisfied by the living presence of the Holy Spirit. Hearts will open to prayer. Churches, once empty, will once again be filled with people thirsting for God. The Eucharist will be the center of daily life, and the Rosary, the chain that unites peoples. Our Lady at Fatima had already announced this moment. At last, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. These words are like a promise written in heaven, a certainty that transcends time and circumstances. And in Garabandal, the visionary girls also spoke of this light-filled future where all humanity will live under the reign of God. But this triumph will not be the result of chance. It will be the result of the spiritual struggle of millions of souls who, in silence and often in tears, offered their sufferings, prayed with devotion, and remained steadfast when all seemed lost. The tears of mothers who prayed for their children will be rewarded. The prayers of the sick who offered their pain will be heard. The sacrifices of those who chose God over the comforts of the world will be accepted. In this new era, creation itself will be renewed. The fields will flourish, the waters will be purified, the air will be clean, and nature will regain the balance it lost due to human sin. The earth will be like a reflection of the lost paradise, a precursor to the eternal glory that awaits those who persevere to the end. The words of the prophet Isaiah will be fulfilled. The wolf and the lamb will graze together. No longer will the voice of weeping or the cry of distress be heard in her. Peace will not only be the absence of war, but the living presence of God in every corner of the world. Children will grow in faith. Young people will find purpose in their lives. Adults will rediscover the value of family and community. And the elderly will be revered for their wisdom and experience. It will be a new humanity, rebuilt on the ruins of pride and selfishness, now guided by love and mercy. However, the Virgin Mary has also been clear, this time of peace will not last forever. It will be a merciful pause before the final fulfillment of the prophecies of the apocalypse, a period of grace to prepare the world for the glorious return of Jesus Christ, the last opportunity to consolidate conversion before the final outcome of human history. Therefore, today more than ever, it is time to decide which side we want to be on. This is the time to raise our gaze, to resume the rosary, to return to the sacraments, to ask for forgiveness, and to begin a new life. Because the triumph is near, the light is beginning to dawn, and while the whole world holds its breath, the sky invites us to walk courageously toward that dawn that is already appearing on the horizon. So, while we still have time, let us open our hearts, respond to the Mother's call, and prepare our souls, because God's plan continues, and the clock of humanity keeps ticking.